Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mediums podcast. I am so excited you all are here and you are in for a treat because we have the most incredible Julie Chandler with us on our podcast today. So, this is one of my absolute favorite things to be able to talk to you. I talk to you all the time, but to be able to do it on the podcast, I'm so excited.
Me
So,
too.
oh yeah. So Julie, tell us about yourself. Like, tell us about you, about your journey into your intuitive. How did you discover your gifts? And just give us a skinny.
Okay, so technically nowadays I classify myself as a psychic business coach. I like to bring in the spiritual into the business world and help people to really get in line with their intuition and trusting it for their business, especially women, because most of us seem to second guess ourselves when it comes to what we should do, the next steps, and especially in a very male dominated industry such as the business world. It is traditionally very, very masculine, very, very bro. And that doesn't cater to us as women who are like, I want to flow here and I want to flow over here and try this. So it's definitely our superpower. So I try and bring people out of their shells and trusting their intuition when it comes to their business and their business model as well. But the history of it, wow. I mean, I have been through many different versions of spiritual, and whether I've called myself a medium, whether I've called myself a psychic, I initially started in the professional spiritual world as an animal communicator and healer, which always shocks people, but it's my favorite entry point, and I'm so glad that I entered it that way. It was probably more difficult because you can't get the clarification of, yes, that's right, from an animal. So I
True.
probably took the hard route, but it does mean that I now just 100% trust what comes through, even if the person now sitting in front of me is like, no, I'm like, sure, yes.
You're like,
Like,
just wait. Just wait. It may
yeah,
not make sense
yeah,
right now.
give it time.
Yeah.
But essentially, I think I've always known I was spiritual. I grew up in a family where it wasn't normal. My mum is Roman Catholic from Irish side, so anything of that is somewhat devil worship. And my dad is atheist, doesn't care, doesn't believe, doesn't has no, just floats along in his own little world, which is fabulous. But I and my brother are actually both very, very in tune, but I'm the one that's followed it and listened and doesn't ignore it.
Yes, I totally get that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been a journey, I'll put it that way. I think I knew as a kid, and then you kind of ignore it and you don't want to be the odd person. And I always stuck out like a sore thumb in every group, every friendship group that I was in, and I didn't realize what it was or why. And it was because I just knew things, I just sort of took my own route, flowed my own way, and it made other people uncomfortable. And I've kind of got comfortable with the fact that my connection makes a lot of people uncomfortable because it also helps a lot of people. So I'm okay that if some people, if that 5% find it weird, I'm all right with that.
Yeah, no kidding. I can feel all the feels, by the way. So it's so fun
Yay.
when one intuitive talks to another. Like, I
I
just
know.
love it. It's so fun. Um, just for people that are like, I have no idea. I'm not aware of those things. Like, what types of things happened to you as a child or in your younger years that you ignored? Do you have any examples of that? Like, this happened and I was like, whoa, that's weird. I don't want to
Yeah.
talk about that,
Well,
for example.
I would say that, I mean, for the general person and people who have also had imaginary friends when they were younger, please know that your imaginary friends and your children's imaginary friends are often spirit and spirit guides. So that is one thing. Because I was so sensitive as a child, I was actually chronically shy. I did
Mm,
not speak to anybody outside of my mum, dad, and my brother, and very, very close family friends. And even then, it took me hours to warm up to them. So if they came to the house for a weekend, the first day I wouldn't speak. I would just hide behind my mum. And I'm talking until I was like 12. So not just like toddler, I'm talking I refused to speak to people. I wasn't mute or anything like that.
sure.
Within my own space, I was very comfortable, very creative, very expressive. I've always been really great with words. However, I just shut the world off. And I think in hindsight, I now know that's because I was seeing things, hearing things, and there was a lot going on. Like I might very well have been seeing spirit around people, people obviously having different auras and bits and pieces like that. And it was just, I was very, very sensitive to everything and every small change. there were certain things where I would really express myself. So for me, my dad, when I was 4 years old, actually was diagnosed with leukemia. And my mum tells a story of how I was at nursery, and my family is very very British. We don't talk about things. You keep things in house, especially as an Irish family. Like it's like lock the doors. We do not communicate. So nobody outside of my family knew that my dad was ill. So off I would trot to nursery, and my mum picked me up one day and tells of a story of the assistant coming over and being like, "Is everything okay at home?" And my mum being like, "Yes, why?" Like very like, "What do you mean?"
What did my daughter say?
But I spent the entire day not talking to anybody, and when we were painting, I only painted them black. I refused to use
Oh,
any colour because I was just showing what I was seeing around my family and what I was seeing around my dad. The colour of cancer is that dark, seeping kind of energy. And I didn't know that until I was much older. But that's the kind of thing, it's like these things are happening. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know, it wasn't something I could talk about. It wasn't then something that was expressed or understood ever.
right. And fair
And so,
enough for your teacher to be like, is everything okay? Because
yeah,
Julie painted
100%.
a giant black piece of artwork.
Yeah, exactly. All the other kids were like rainbows, and Julie's like, no, it's a black rainbow. It's just like how we perceive things as a child. I was very aware of energy in my room. I was very aware of, and again, it's in hindsight. And even when I speak to my parents now, they're like, "Oh, I don't really remember that."
Right.
It's like, I do, I do. I mean, I remember the shadows. I remember the figures. I remember the dreams and the vividness and all of that, but it just wasn't something that was spoken about. And I don't think it was until I was probably about 13, 14 when I started to think, oh, it might be this.
Oh,
So
interesting.
there was quite a gap, and even then I didn't kind of dig into the world of like, oh, it might be this, so I'm going to explore it.
Yeah.
But again, in hindsight, I'm like, I was the kid at the bookstore that was on looking at the metaphysical tarot decks and bits and pieces. And back then, like, it would be one teeny weeny shelf with like 20
Right.
books that are like right on the floor, right at the back of the shop. It wasn't popular, it wasn't in your face. But I was that person that was like, oh, let me just scroll through this, like all of that kind of thing. And now you're like, oh, okay, it's because I was drawn to that. I was called to
Totally.
that. I was supposed to be here. But in the moment, sometimes it's quite difficult to realize and acknowledge that that's what it is or what it was. So I never really had fear around it. Again, this is something that a lot of people, when they've come to me for intuition programs, are like, I'm really scared to like
Sure.
tap in because there might be something that appears. It's like, it doesn't really work like
What if
that.
something bad happens? What if they tell me something terrible? Right?
It's like, I don't think that happens. So it's not
Yeah.
happened yet. So,
Well, it's interesting you said. So when I was a kid, I my spiritual gifts really truly awakened in my adulthood. But I remember being a kid just knowing things, and I just knew something, and in religion classes in particular. And I would ask question after question after question after question, so much so that a teacher called my parents in and said, "Can you please have your daughter stop asking me questions?"
oh.
And my parents said, "Why? Do you not know the answers?" And I was like, "Good job, Dad. Good job." But I just knew things that other people didn't know. But you talk about how you could like see things. So tell us about that. What is that like? Like I could see spirit. Like does that mean you physically see them? Help that make sense.
So it's changed over the years, in all honesty. So again, when I was very young, it was kind of like that phase in between like sleep and dream. So I would kind of see something in the room. But the difference for me would be, like sometimes you see a shape in the room, and then when you fully wake up, you'd be like, oh, it's my hoodie hanging on the door. Of course it
Sure.
looks like that. This would be a shape that then wouldn't make sense. Like there would be
There
nothing
wouldn't
there
be a physical
to,
item to represent the shadow, for
yeah,
example.
yeah.
Okay.
So it started really, really happening in my early 20s. And this was very much when spirit were like knocking on the door of like, yo, you need to, this is your path, like wake up. And I mean, I talk about this one moment where it wasn't actually seeing a person, although I had seen people. But I woke up one night and in a double bed that's just me, I'm looking at the other pillow and I can see a huge praying mantis on this pillow. Now, at the time, I'm in South London. There is no business for a praying mantis to be in this climate, in this area, in this room. And I'm looking at it like, I can see this.
Yeah.
This is
You could,
here.
right.
Like,
To you, it
I
was very real.
100% real. So I've
Yeah.
woken up in the middle of the night. I can fully see it. I'm backing out of the bed, looking at it, like refusing. So I'm now fully awake because I'm moving and I can still see it. I turn on the light, thinking that when I turn on the light, it will go. It's still there. And then I look out of the, like into the hallway and then look back and it's gone. And I'm like, okay, we're seeing things now.
Yeah.
Brilliant. But
Yeah.
when I actually looked it up for me, so again, when we look things up, I do have to give the prerequisite. There is so much information out there, but
Yeah.
trust the first thing that you see, because if I Google something and you Google something, we'll get something completely different.
That's great advice.
Right?
Yeah.
So I, at the time, Googled, what the hell is this? Like,
What the frick is a praying mantis?
like,
Spirit means spiritually.
I don't want this. I don't like it. And it came up and said that it was a spiritual awakening. And I was like, okay, yeah, lucky me, right?
You're like, oh, tough. Go figure.
But at that same period of time, I would see spirit in the room, like and around my bed. So I would wake up in the middle of the night and they would be next to the bed, which was kind of scary. But for me, it was more like, can you not? Like, and to the point that I remember actually asking the universe, and this was something I just instinctively knew to do even before I'd done any research, of like asking them how they're going to show to you, which people don't realize you can do. You can actually say to them, look, like, back up, do not appear next to my bed in the middle of the night. So then what they were doing, which for me is hilarious, but for some people not so much, they would then be at the window. But I was on the third floor and I didn't appreciate them being in the window because again, I would wake up and see the faces in the window and be like, why are there faces on the third floor in the window?
Totally.
But that was just my spirit team's like way of joking with me, being funny with me, of like, well, you asked us not to be in the room, so we're going to be here instead. And it's like, yeah, that's scarier. Please don't.
They do have they do have a sense of humor. Like people would think,
100%.
like, isn't it just like magical, perfect little angels? And you're like, no, there's like really, they can be quite humorous sometimes.
Yeah. My spirit team love a joke. They love, like, they just love laughing at me and with me.
Yeah.
They're very, very funny. And it's like, but that's my way of communication as well, is humor.
Right.
Like humor is 100% how I operate with everything. So of course they're going to be the same, on that same wavelength. Otherwise I'd just be like, oh, you're really boring.
Yeah. So I will feel a lot of things, and we'll get into this and talk about this a little bit, but I'll see orbs and I'll see little flashes of light, but I don't actually see physical things. But you actually will see like a physical face, or will you see colors, for example? Do you see somebody looks pink or red or white or different things like that? Do you see colors or auras?
So colors and auras, I don't see in the day to day. So if I'm walking down the street, I don't see people's colors. But when I first started meditating, which was again around this time where I was trying different meditation techniques, anytime I closed my eyes, I would see colors. And it was the same when I started embarking on Reiki. So like energy healing, it would be colors, like 100%. Like I would tap in, and if I was doing a healing session, I could essentially, if I closed my eyes, then see the color. And I kind of give this description because a lot of people have this and they don't realize that it's actually spirit or energy, essentially. But if ever you close your eyes and before you're falling asleep, you see what looks like a lava lamp with all of the like bubbles and the different colors moving and shaping in front of your eyes. And you're like, oh, lava lamp. Yeah, that's exactly what that looks like. That's energy. But people don't always realize that that's what it is. And that's how I see colors. But the faces and seeing people, for me, kind of stopped once I actually started practicing and working with spirit. So once I actually started doing things like working with animals, using tarot, working with people, actually seeing spirit in my room stopped. So I don't really see.
Are you happy about that? Are you okay with that?
I think so. I mean, I still see spirit sometimes and it will be very, very brief. it's really interesting for me because I get to compare to my brother who doesn't practice any of this, but he really sees spirit. So he
Oh,
sees like crossed souls or souls that have like just recently crossed souls,
sure.
as well as like residual energy that's in a property. And again, talking
Interesting.
about the fact how things shift and change. So he first started talking about it before me. So I was doing it and dealing with energy, but I never spoke about it. But he got really into, because of his wife at the time, he got very into having like going on ghost hunts and things like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, in the
So he was like,
paranormal
oh,
world. Yeah.
well, no one else could see anything, and I could see things. Like, and he was just like, it's really weird. Like, I could see this guy there, and I'm looking at everyone else here, like, why is no one seeing this
Yes.
guy? Like, I could see him. But my brother used to run a removals business, and he has some amazing stories of where he's moving people's houses, and so in the house he can see souls and
Wild.
people who are with different people. But recently I asked him because I was like, oh, you don't do that anymore, that industry. You don't speak about or embrace it anymore. You don't look at anything anymore. So I was like, do you still see spirit? And he made me laugh so much because he was like, no, not really. And I was like, what do you mean, not really?
Yeah.
He was like, well, I've not really seen anything, but I did go to a property the other day. So he's now an Airbnb concierge in the south of France. So he goes to a property the other day and he was like, yeah, and the toilet brush was spinning. And I was like, what do you mean it was spinning? He's like, it was just sort of spinning. And I thought maybe I'd knocked it, but it just kept going. I was like, well, what did you do? It's like, well, I just got on with my job. Okay. So
Just
it
ignored
just
it.
shows you it's like how different things, so there's a lot of people who can see spirit, but they just don't do anything with it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, for
And they don't
me,
tell anybody. Do you agree?
this is
Because
it,
I talk to
100%.
people all the time and they're like, I'll do a reading for them. And then afterwards we'll process and they'll say, okay, so this and this and this happened to me. And I haven't even told my spouse, my parents, like I haven't told anybody. Like my dad came to me in a dream and told me he was going to die. And then the next morning somebody called and told me my dad died or, all sorts of things that happen. And they're like, I've never told anyone because they'll think I'm crazy. So we got a whole bunch of people that are having these things happen that think that they
Yeah.
are alone.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. Or they think it's weird or it's not,
Yeah.
they can't justify it, so they just ignore it. And it's
Yeah.
very much that energy of like, oh, I don't want someone to think I'm crazy. I don't want
Right.
someone to think I'm weird. And I see that a lot as well. And it's unbelievable, really, because I'm just like, if you just listened to that and trusted that, like how much you can actually open up to have such an
Totally.
ease in your life. It's so much easier when you listen to spirit and the universe, honestly.
I know. And it's so funny because like as I continue to get more and more into this work and meet more and more
Mhm.
people like you, I am learning about some of the most successful people in the world have like intuitives on speed dial. They just
Mhm.
don't tell people, but they're
Yeah,
CEOs, business owners, like big
yeah,
business people. And they are like, this is my secret weapon. So I don't want people to know that I use
this
intuitive
is
to
it.
help me guide my business. But you're in the business world. So you're like,
Mhm.
use this as your secret weapon or your
Yeah.
advantage in getting a leg up in the business world.
It cuts through so many of the decisions. Like we're told over and over again that we face as humans decision fatigue. And when it comes to our business, because that's rooted in our security and our money and finances, we have so many big decisions to make and small decisions that lead to the big decisions. We spend so much time thinking, overthinking, overanalyzing. This person's done it like this,
Totally.
so I've got to do it this way. This person does it like this, so I've got to do it this way. But everything in your gut and your being and your soul is going, don't do it that way. It won't
Mm-hmm.
work for you. But you do it anyway. And you spend thousands on a coach, on a program, on an offer, and you're like, oh, well, that didn't work. I knew it wouldn't work. Like, why did you not just listen?
Yeah.
Save so much time and money, please, people.
Because the world told me it was the safe decision. So I chose it, even though my intuition told me otherwise.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, we all do it. I posted recently, and I think I might have mentioned it to you in a voice note, that I had a day where I just didn't listen to my intuition. And it wasn't for business, it wasn't for work. I was out on a dog walk and I'd somehow got into a very muddy area of like returning from the beach back to the car. And as I looked on the ground, I'm like, the direct line, I was like, that's fine, I'll go that way. My intuition was telling me, go round, like go round. And I'm like, no, direct line, easier, straighter, quicker, we'll go this way. And I'm then like having to go through mud puddles, my shoes are soaked. The dog is looking at me like, what are we doing? And I'm like, I should have just listened. I
Yeah,
should have
you
just
knew
followed
better,
along.
mama.
But we all do it. So even when we're really in tune, we still get the logic bug that goes, just do that because that's logical.
Yes. Yes. But when you talk to people, almost everyone has a story where you can say, I didn't trust my gut. It's like
Mhm.
that phrase is somehow safe to say out
Mhm.
in public. Like, oh, my gut, my intuition told me this, but I didn't listen to it. But if you say like my team in spirit and my guardian angels and my, all my peeps on the other side were telling me this, then that's too far.
This is it. And it's like, well, who do you think is actually pulling at your energy around your gut for you to feel that? Like, what do you think that
Where do you
is?
think
It's
it's
like,
coming
hello.
from? Yeah,
Yes, yeah,
100%.
exactly.
So, how do you tell people what you do for a living? So, obviously, you're an
Oh,
intuitive business coach, you're a psychic, you're a medium, you have all these incredible tools at your fingertips. When
yeah.
you're just like hanging with somebody, or you're on a train, or you're at a restaurant, people are like, oh, what do you do for a living? Like, what's your elevator speech, or how do you tell people? What are their reactions? I'm
So
dying to know.
I still depend on intuition for that because some people I'm like, if I say that I am a psychic medium and I use it for business, they're going to completely shut down. So I sometimes will have a workaround where I'll say, oh, I'm a business coach. I help, female business owners, blah, 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 and allow it to like escalate and be like, oh, no, I try and take a more intuitive approach and da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Whereas the last year or two, I've really have like still tried to step in and be like, oh no, I'm a psychic intuitive. So you do have experiences where you just know it's safe to say. Like I went on a
Yes.
dog walk the other day and I was in. It had randomly snowed. We weren't expecting snow. It wasn't snowing where I set off, and we got to the woods and there was like a smattering of snow and it was beautiful. And as I'm walking around, I encountered a lady. We were talking as you do on dog walks. Oh, your dog's lovely. Oh, my dog's lovely too. Woo, woo, woo. And she said, oh, isn't it like glorious here with this lovely snow? And I was like, yes, this woods is magical. She was like, oh, I feel like that too.
Oh.
And she literally suddenly went, I hugged a tree the other day. I know that's really weird. And I was like, it's not weird. I'm a psychic medium. If you don't hug a tree, there's something wrong with you. And it was just that moment of like pure innocence where both
Yeah.
of us were like, we can say what we want in this moment and not think each other are weird. And I know there'll be people who are listening that are like, hugging a tree. Are you actually serious?
Yeah. Connect with Mother Earth. Get
Honestly,
down with her. Yeah.
one of the things that I was taught when I did my Reiki training is actually giving energy healing to a tree. And it was one of the most powerful things that I did during like my kind of understanding of energy, because especially when you do it in different countries and feel into different types of trees, because you actually can sense whatever you're doing, but it's just sensing the energy and feeling the energy and understanding the difference, because one tree does not feel the same as another tree. Let's put it that
Okay, I'm
way.
going to start hugging all the trees and getting their energy vibe, and then I'll call you.
If you're drawn to a tree, just go and hug it. I've got a client of mine who she, again, was kind of resistant to, like, she knew that she was somewhat intuitive, but she was always resistant to opening up to it. And I remember having a reading with her. I was like, oh, there's this thing with you in a tree. Like, I know it sounds weird, but I was like, you just need to be near this tree. And she's like, oh my God, I've got a tree in the local park that I sort of just go and sit next to like all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And it just charges my energy. She's like, but I don't really tell anyone. And it's
It's,
that same thing. It's
yeah,
like she just completely gets charged by nature in that way, comes away, feels completely different. It releases all the stress with the kids, the husband, the day job, all of it is gone when she just goes and sits with this tree.
oh,
It's
that's great.
unbelievable. It's like finding your thing. Like it's okay for it to be a weird thing.
Totally. Like get down with your weird self. Get down with it.
Yeah.
I did have a client of mine who had done mediumship readings with me and had passed away recently. And she came to me that night and showed me what it was like for her to pass away, like walking through a tunnel of light. And she said, this is so funny. You talked about trees. So she showed me the tree of life and she
Mhm.
walked around it and hugged the tree of life.
Oh,
That was the first thing she did
I love
when
that.
she passed and went to the other side. Yeah.
That's
So it's
amazing.
absolutely not weird at all to hug a tree. In fact, you even do it on the other side. So, okay. So tell me a little bit about when you're having a conversation with spirit, you're doing a business intuitive coaching session with somebody or doing a reading for someone in some way, shape, or form. Is there ever a time when you're like, they want you to say something and you're having this dialogue with them that no one else can hear because it's in your head. And you're like, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that. Can I say it a different way? Are you sure you want me to say that? Like, have you had any experiences where you're like, oh shit, I'm not saying that. Are you kidding me? Like
Yeah.
they're going to fall off their chair if I say it that way. And then they tell you, no, say it that way. Do you have any stories like that?
So I'm actually quite good now in that I just let things come out of my mouth, and I will tell people, like, I don't want to say that. I would
Yeah.
word it like this. They are, however, saying it like
So
this.
you'll do the precursor. Like, I'm going to share with
Yeah.
you something. I would say it's slightly different, but this is what your team and Spirit wants me to say.
Because I'll kind of pause. It's kind of that moment where you are having that dialogue. And I have this thing where I like kind of look off to the side. So I'm quite often like looking off to the side and I'm just like, I don't want to say it like that. So I'll say, like, okay, they're telling me this and I'm going to word it how they word it. And this is how they're wording it. I would say it like this, but they're stopping me because that's often how it is that I will go to say something that's a logical response to what's coming through
Exactly.
my mind. So it's just like, oh, they're telling me that you're going to have, chicken for dinner. And I'll be like, I want to say that you're having chicken for dinner, but they're going, you're having cluck, cluck, cluck. Like whatever it is, make it like funny and weird. It's kind of like, these are my words.
Yeah.
These are the words that they're saying. And it will always make sense to that person, like whatever it actually ends up being. And it's difficult sometimes because basically I believe how all of us work is that we can only go by our own frame of reference.
Right.
And so when we see things, hear things, feel things, know things, when you're about to say it, sometimes you just can't quite get what they're actually trying to say.
Right.
And sometimes you just have to say, like, okay, I don't know that I want to talk about this. I had a reading literally last week, and it was not even a business. It was a normal reading. She does have her own business. That is how she knows me, but it was a normal reading. And I said to her at the start, I was like, is there anything direct that you want to get into, right? Because I'm someone, I don't want to sit here and have a reading where it's all like, it's just really floaty and I'll just pull cards and see what they say. It's like, no, if you're here with me, ask the questions that you want to ask.
What is on your heart? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I'll find out anyway, but just give me direction to start with.
It'll just speed up the process.
Exactly. It just sort of honestly, it saves time. I'm like, you're here for a short period of time to talk to me, to talk to Spirit. Let's get the answers. And she was very much like, oh, I didn't really have anything like top of mind. And I was like, well, they're telling me you want to talk about business, so we'll talk about business. So we get into that. But all of a sudden, I'm suddenly seeing that half her money's just gone, like disappeared. And I'm like, I don't know how to word this because I'm like, my frame of reference would be, has she had a divorce? And it's like, the money's gone. And they're like, not divorce. And I'm like, where's her money gone?
Yeah. Yeah.
And because money is such a personal thing, it's like I can easily tell people that their partners are cheating, but talking about money for me is more of a like, okay, we need to approach this because especially if you're about to say to somebody, where's your money gone? And if you got that wrong and the money hadn't gone anywhere, they'd be like, where's my money going? Like,
do you think it was like your human, I don't want to be wrong? Like I don't want to be wrong part of you as a human?
I mean, I'm so good now at knowing I'm like, if I say something and it's quite wrong, it's because I haven't translated it right. Like that's all it is.
Or it hasn't happened yet. That could be too,
This is, But I mean, with her, thankfully, I said, and I literally paused and I was like, look, I'm going to say this. And if you don't want to go down this route, you don't have to go down this route.
Mm-hmm.
But where's your money gone? I was like, they're telling me that half your money's gone. And she was like, oh, yeah, my accountant stole my money. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, so it wasn't even a scary thing to bring up. Like she was, she knew about it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the way it kind of came to, and because it hadn't come through my logical mind of accountant could steal money. There wasn't a frame of reference for Spirit to like give me. They're like, money is gone. Money gone. Money gone. And I'm like, okay, money gone? Where's money gone?
I guess I just need to ask, where is your money gone? Yeah. So I had oh, go ahead, finish your story.
I was going to say, it actually ended up being really like quite healing for her because I had to sort of say, look, she's like, I think the money will come back. And I was like, it will come back, but not from him. Like it's coming back around, like in a different process. And it was actually a nice way for her to sort of see money and view money out in the world. I was like, stop thinking about it like he's stolen your money, thinking about it like that money's gone to him. Yes, that's bad. However, he's probably used it for something that's then helped not to say that it's helped that person, but the train of money of like, if he's done that in a grocery store, spent some in a grocery store, that's helped that person in the grocery store who works in that grocery store that's then paying for their family and done it. Like, it
Mm.
helps when money is in flow, it helps. So even if the money's taken from you or doesn't come to you in the way you want it to, it doesn't mean that that money is not out doing good and that it won't come back to you in a good way.
Okay, that's a beautiful story and such a powerful way to retrain your human experience when something
Mm.
shitty happens. Because you're like,
Yeah.
I'm just mad and I hope they burn in hell and I hate them and I wish all the bad things on them, where people just can't let go of something bad that happened to them. And
Yeah.
what a beautiful way to help that client like reframe it to say, it's just money, it's gone and it's doing other good things in the world, even if it came from a bad source, and new money will float your way in another way.
Yeah. Well, this is it. And when you actually sit in the negative, the money can't flow to you. Like, it's just,
Right.
you're blocking the money. So
That's right.
it's like you have to, no matter how hard it is. And I said to her, I was like, there will be days that you're like, this guy,
Yes.
like that won't ever go away. Like, you will still get annoyed because that is human nature. But the thing is the reframing and how quickly can you put yourself back into an energy of, okay, that money's gone out and done some good. Like, imagine what that money could be doing for somebody right now. Like, you don't know where it is.
Yeah.
So just act as if it's doing the best it can in the world, because it's probably doing some good. Money is attracted to good.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like my team in spirit, or when I do readings for people, their teams in spirit, I'll get the phrase a lot like, you're blocking your blessings. They'll say they're
Mm-hmm.
blocking their blessings, and it's a cue that there's something they're resisting that's causing them to not have their blessings flow to them. So
Yeah.
similar to
Yeah.
that experience.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I've had a funny story where I was doing a reading for a mom and two sisters, and both of the sisters had recently gone through breakups and divorces. And their team in spirit, I went to the first sister, like brand kind of new off of divorce, like within the last year. And they tell her to spread her legs. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna say that. Like, can I just tell her to I'm having this dialogue with her team in spirit. Can I just tell her to like get out there? And they're like, no, like say that exact phrase, those exact words. And I was like, oh my God. So I do. I said, okay, this is weird. And kind of like what you did. This isn't how I would say it, but your team in spirit wants me to specifically say, you need to spread your legs. And the other sister who's sitting there in the reading laughed so hard she fell onto the floor. And she's like, I freaking told you. I told you. It was like that phrase that she used, I guess. And then the sister who I was doing the reading for said, I know, I'm just scared to put myself out there because I don't want to get hurt. And so it actually meant something meaningful to her. And then I get to the next sister and they say, tell her to close her legs. And I was like, what? And so I say, well, I'm supposed to tell you to close your legs. And then the sister who I did the reading for first just dies laughing. She goes, I told you, you're such a whore. You need to stop whoring around. And they laugh. And it took this really tense moment of going through these relationship challenges. And they laughed so hard, they cried. And I was like, oh my God, this is so insane that I'm saying this. And I thought it was so like wrong to say that. My human side said, I can't say those words. Like, that's crazy. But it meant something to them and it worked and it was hilarious. And I just died laughing.
It is that. It's those specific words. I mean, I've had things where it's like a specific tarot card or oracle card will come out, and I'm like, okay, this is saying, I've got one, and I can't remember what it is. It's something like follow the leader. But I had one, and it came out, and because it's got a picture of an elephant on, for me, sometimes that can mean like mother. And I was just like, oh, okay. Why are we hating on the mum? Like, there's a mum issue. And they're like, that's not what the card says.
Oh, they're correcting you.
Yeah, it's like, I know that the card says take the lead, but they're referencing the mother aspect here. Like, and they'd had like back and forth disagreements. Like, the mum wanted to do, I think it was something around their wedding. Like, it was like mum energy of like, oh, we've got to do this. And she's like, it's my wedding. Like, let me do what I want, kind of thing. So it's like things sometimes just don't make sense in the logical, like, tangible. My brain says we do it this way, and spirit are just like, yo, this.
Yes. Because for me, it's a little bit And I'd love to hear how this is for you. For me, it's a little bit of a charades. Like they're showing me, flashing me images of things. And then sometimes, like in my mind's eye, I'm hearing words. So I'm taking these flashing images and words. Sometimes I feel things too. But in this particular instance, when they're trying to convey something specific, it's like a game of charades and words. And I put them together based on this. I would say it's like a giant charades chart. This means this,
Hmm.
this means this, this means this. And it's our own language. So a
Yeah.
different intuitive might have a different descriptor for that image, but that's kind of
Yeah.
the language we've created together with my team in spirit to make sense of things. Is
Yeah.
it like that for you? Or
Yeah,
what is it
so
like for you?
what you're talking about, I kind of call your own like dictionary, because essentially that's what you're creating, and that's what
Yes.
when I've taught people intuition, that's what I'm teaching them. I'm like, it has to be your thing, and they're like, but there's got to be like one set thing. So there's not one set thing. There is not one set thing. Like a bar of chocolate to you means one thing, to me it means another, because for me spirit are really great at actually like tapping into our own stories and experiences. So one thing that they do for me all the time is they'll refer to like my parents, or they'll refer to my brother, they'll refer
Yes.
to my grandma. So the amount of times I've done readings for someone and I'm like, who's the Irish person, and they're like, oh, that's on my mum's side, and I'm like, okay, because they're showing me my nan, like, and she's just a
Yes.
little old Irish lady.
Right.
So I'm like, is it grandmother or is it Irish? And it's like, oh, it's the Irish thing. Okay, cool. Because that's
Totally.
the other thing, is that images can have multiple, they can have
Meanings.
multiple meanings. So again, it's like you're showing me my grandmother, I'm going to be like grandmother Irish, or maybe I'm talking about her personality, like she was one hell of a horrible woman when she was alive. Like, so sometimes it's like, oh, okay, if it's not those two, then we need to talk about someone's attitude problem, because that's what they're talking about when they're
Yep.
showing
Totally.
me my nan. They do it a lot with so they'll show my mum a lot because she has a lot of kind of fears. She suffers like, it's kind of silent anxiety, I call it. She wouldn't ever acknowledge that it's anxiety, but everything freaks her out. So it's like a lot of holding on to things. So if someone has like money issues, or they're kind of like, stay in your job and you work in the same job forever. And I'm like, so again, especially when we're in business, the amount of times they'll show me my mum to say, there's someone around you who is saying that you've got to go and get a real job. And they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, it's because my mum will always say to me, still to this day, you could always just go and get a real job. I could. I have a real job. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
I could and I do.
Yeah.
And it puts money in my bank account. Thank you.
But it's just
Yeah.
a different way of viewing things. And then I'm like, okay, well, I know how to deal with that, but the person who's sitting in front of me might not. So then I can give tips, advice, etc., on how to navigate that situation. But yeah, during a reading, I don't so much get like images anymore. Sometimes I do. I think it might depend on the person, like their spirit team rather than mine. I think my spirit team like to communicate with me in feeling. Like I get a lot physically.
Yeah.
Um, like I had a reading last week, and again, because I do, well, now I do all of my readings on Zoom and only on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you can kind of see yourself and you can see the other person. And I was doing this thing where I was holding up my index fingers, like both hands, and I had one was slightly above the other, and I was doing a spiral. And I'm like, oh, they're telling me that there's like a transition for both of you. And I kind of acknowledged, I was like, oh, there's different. I was like, this is you. You've done part of your spiral already. This is your husband. He's not done the spiral. And then all of a sudden I was like, is he looking at new jobs? She was like, oh my God, he's downstairs now applying for a new job. Like, and I was like, he needs to go through the transition. So once he's done that, then, because they were talking about moving house, and she was like, I don't know if we should move now. And I was like, she'd gone through a transition with hers. She'd gone back into employment. I was like, he needs to change his job. Then you can move.
Yes.
Be in sync with each other. And that's them physically moving through me for me to then be like, that's what they're talking about. It's not me explaining what I'm seeing. It's me moving my hands and then being like, oh, I'm moving my hands. Like, well, why am I moving my hands? Okay, they're telling me a story through the physical. So it kind of works in lots of different ways for me. So I'll get some images. Mostly I will hear things and know things. And then it's like physical hand movement.
Validations.
Yeah.
Yeah. They give me a lot of red, yellow, green lights. So if they're asking a question, I'll get, like, if it's a no, it's a red light. Or if it's like, wait, they'll give me yellow lights or
Mhm.
green lights. Or if I get it right, they'll flash a green light. Like, that is right. Keep going. You're right. They don't see it yet, but they will. Like, keep going. So they give me like a flash of a red, yellow, green light, or they'll show me like a stoplight and they'll say bottom, like meaning green. They'll be like green.
Mhm.
So they'll do that. But I get a ton of like charades type things. Like,
Mhm.
but I don't always get it right. So one time I was doing a reading for a lady and we were talking about her son, and they showed me a baseball bat, and then they
Mhm.
flashed the word other team, like in my mind's eye. So I interpreted that to mean he was gay, like he's
Yeah.
batting for the other team.
Mhm.
And so I started to say, is your son, experimenting with his sexuality? Is he trying to figure out who he is? And she's like, oh no, he loves the boobs. And I was like, um, okay, well, I'm just going to tell you what they're showing me. They're showing me a baseball bat and the other team. And she goes, oh, no, he's literally thinking about playing baseball for the other team this summer, like a school down the road, and he's not sure if he should do it or not. I'm like, okay, well, he's not gay. However, yes, play baseball for the other team. The answer is yes. And I was like, oops, oh shit, got that
This
one
is
wrong.
it.
But she laughed. She was like, it's fine. She goes, oh no, he loves the boobs. And I'm like, okay, well,
I think you find that the more you do the work, the more you can kind of sense into and lean into, like, okay, this is what I'm seeing. Because we do generally, because it's human nature, we don't want to be wrong. Like,
right.
we know that what we're getting is right in some way, shape, or form, but we just need to translate it. It is just a language
That's right.
translation. And it is for me, I'm like, the more you actually use language, like, okay, I don't quite know what this means, but this is what I'm seeing. Like, can you
Yes.
take that? Can you, like, does that make sense to you?
Right.
Because sometimes I'll get such small bits of information, and especially people who come, and I don't know if you've had this yet, but I think maybe because I often have people who come in from tarot and they've just found my website. So they haven't been told about me. There's no word of mouth. There's no nothing. They come on the call and they're quite reserved, and they're quite like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this person's good. I don't, because they know nothing
Right.
about me. There's no
Right.
connection, no rapport. And with that, because their energy is so blocked off, it's hard to get information on them and about them. And you're kind of like really like pulling to be
It's
like,
it's true for me all the time. Like when you're energetically putting walls and blocks up and you're in doubt, it
yeah,
is like pulling teeth to get the
yeah,
meaningful pieces. And then they don't talk, they don't give you anything back. And
yeah.
you're like, woo, this is gonna be a real fun 45 minutes together. And those are the ones where you're like, okay, this is part of my job. And hopefully this will awaken them in some way, shape, or form. And in the future, they'll trust it more. But right now, this is like pulling teeth at the dentist.
This is it. I mean, most like 99% of the time, I will end up them being like, "Oh my God, okay, yes." Like, but sometimes
Yes.
it goes round and round. Like, I had a woman, and I now for some reason I cannot for the life of me remember the exact topic, but I said something to her. Say, for example, we were talking about work of like, "Oh, are you looking to?" This is it. I remember now. She was talking about her husband, and so she hadn't asked anything about love, but it came up in the cards. So I was like, oh, is there something with like where you're wanting a bit more attention from your partner? And she's like, no, everything's fine. I'm like, okay, I'm not saying it's not fine, but I'm saying there's an energy here that's talking about like you wanting something more. We go off in a completely different direction, and then they bring me back to it. And I'm like, okay, there's still something here where they're talking about the relationship. She's like, no, everything's fine. I'm like, okay. Again, not
and
saying
you
it's not
and
fine.
you know that's not true, and she just doesn't want to talk about it, which that's okay, it happens. But
At the end of the reading, she actually
yeah.
said to me, she said, oh, so I've got this thing where I just sometimes wonder if there's more for me out there. Like, I really love my husband. I'm really, really happy, but I'm not completely fulfilled. And I was like,
Mm,
okay, so when I asked you multiple times before, and you're like, no, everything's fine. I was like, it's because you're not when I'm saying attention, she's just not saying yes, it's attention. She's saying like it's an emotional fulfillment.
right,
And I'm
she
like,
didn't like the word. Yeah.
but they're showing me you need to go on more dates, you need to be more connected. And I'm just going, attention, you want more attention from him. Is he distracted? Is he focusing on work? And she'll be like, yeah, he's focused on work, but that's okay. Like, what do you want me to say to you?
Yeah, I know. And I'm excited actually for this to move into the segment of like stories or how it happens. And
Mhm.
because I think this is the part that people wonder the most about, like, what is it like to do this? And how, like, these stories that happen, and how do you tell people? And, like, kind of the curiosity killed the cat part. So I think that's so true, right? Where
Mhm.
you'll have something that you're telling them and they're like, no, 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 all the resistance. But if spirit keeps bringing it back up, if they let it go, then it's kind of an acknowledgement that the person really truly isn't ready. But if they
Mhm.
keep circling the wagons, it's like, okay, I'm going to try it this way. I'm going to try it this way. I'm going to try it this way, because clearly this is like the big thing that they need to get, if that makes sense. Do you
Yeah.
agree?
Yeah, 100%. Like, and spirit will repeat themselves, like for sure. I laugh about this all the time. So one of my most popular readings is my year ahead readings, and I do them every December for the full year ahead. And what I actually do is, so they're pre-recorded, so no one's on the call with me. I'm just literally listening to what spirit are saying about every single month of the year. And I use two tarot decks to go into each month, as well as then anywhere up to another eight oracle decks where I'm just pulling cards. And honestly, 9 times out of 10 on every reading, it's just the same message coming out over and over again in different decks.
In
And I
different
can
ways. Yeah.
pull and just pull out three cards and be like, this is the same, this is the same, this is the same. Like, they're repeating messages for a reason.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you have an example of that, Julie? So for people that aren't familiar with that, like, do you have one that you did this year, without divulging the client, but like, for instance, this kept showing up for this person, and this and this and this message. And, my hope is that they take it and do something with it, because this was the reoccurring pattern for
yeah.
2024.
Yes, 100%. So there's been examples of like letting things go. So one of the things that I also like to do is I like to pull up like what blocks you're facing, because most of us just go through life and we don't realize that we're facing a block. We sit there and we make excuses for ourselves. We sit there and we talk about like, this isn't happening, this isn't working, this, and we just moan as human beings. And then we just get up and get on with the day again. However, most of the time that's actually happening daily or almost daily, and that's an energetic block, but people don't realize that because they think that that's normal. It's not. You can move through these things, but again, it's our human nature to just put obstacles in our way and give excuses. But one of the ones that came up this recently, and one of the reasons it was actually quite difficult for me to do, is because I actually know this person.
Mm.
So having to, sometimes I'll do readings and I don't know the person, and I can kind of, I just say what I want. Like, you're facing this block, this is coming up, and it will be right. They'll message and be like, oh, totally get it. But when you're reading for someone, you kind of then have that human nature and that friendship of like, I've got to navigate this like gently. But I'd already encountered multiple victim mentalities that they were displaying. They were like pushing things onto, so I'm someone who like values freedom so much, and I can sort of travel whenever I want to. I've kind of tailored my life to being able to just not work if I don't want to, or work on days that I do. And that had started to trigger them in my life.
Mhm.
And so I'd pushed the reading back quite a lot, because I was like, I know that spirit are going to be like, victim mentality. And that was the first card that came out, victim mentality. But then it was like continual throughout the reading of just different things of like, you keep saying that you don't have any time, but you're wasting time. You keep saying like, I don't have enough support, but you push your husband away. Like, there's so many things. It's like the same thing. It's like victim, 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 victim. And it's like, how do you kind of, even then it's like, I've got these oracle cards that are saying, literally, one of them does literally say victim mentality. One says like, get out of your own way, this kind of thing. They're there. And then during the months, I can be like, okay, so in March, something's going to come up and you're resisting it because you're going to act as if you don't have this, you don't have that, blah, 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 blah. So it just repeated throughout the whole
Mm.
reading. And thankfully, they took it really well. And they were
Oh,
like, yeah,
good.
I totally hear what you're saying. Like, they kind of took it maybe like, say, 25%. And they're like, yeah, I do that. And it's like, okay, cool. As
That's
long as it
better than
fits that
zero.
25. Yeah, exactly. But it does. It's the same, either the same cards, just in a different way, or there'll be things like, I've had clients where I talk about like they need to like speak more. This comes up a lot. I get physical sensations in my throat where I'm
Same.
like, you're
Yeah.
not speaking, you're not
Hmm.
doing what you're not using
They
your
give me
voice.
all the energy in my throat chakra. And it's like,
Yeah.
you're not speaking your truth, or you're not speaking up.
Yes. So I actually, side note on that, I had a really interesting conversation, and I'm gonna butcher this because I've forgotten her surname, but I think it's Tracy. But she's a voice coach who she spoke live at BBD Live, and she speaks about like how she can hear tonality in your voice. And
Right.
I look at her like, you are a magical being who can see and pick up frequency, but she looks at it from a very scientific perspective.
Right.
And I had a voice audit with her, so just a 20-minute call. And when we were talking, I said to her, I said, "Oh, you will find this really interesting because you deal with like the data aspect of voice and using voice and how it, it's all different." And I said, over however many years of doing reading, I've done thousands of readings. And I said, 9 times out of 10, a woman will come to me and I will be like, there's a throat issue. And it's always women. And I said, any reading that I have done for a man, never had the throat issue.
Oh, I
Not
have.
once. Oh, have you? That's really
Yes.
interesting because I've never
Yes.
had it. So I'm like, I attract the woman that really needs to,
Yeah, maybe
like,
that's like they send those people to you. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So it's fascinating how those things happen. But again, so I'm like saying at the beginning of the reading, like, oh, my throat, I need to clear my throat. To the point when I do these readings, because I do so many, I actually take antiseptic spray because that's how
Oh,
many people like, because I'm
have
like,
your
numb my
throat?
throat because I don't want to feel this. Like, I've got to get through these readings. But then they will show me, like, they'll pull multiple cards that have got like the same color and it's the throat chakra color. And I like can then collate them at the end and be like, again, here's the throat.
Here's
Like,
all the blue.
yeah, yes. So you then it's just like, okay, and now another reminder. So yeah, they essentially double down, and I say this all the time of like it's easier to trust spirit when you realize that they will double down for you. If
Yeah.
you in your day-to-day life you're like, oh, I've got a gut feeling, then ask for another sign because they will double down. Like they are not afraid to double down for you.
Yeah. This is a fun segue into signs because
Yes.
messages and signs, because that is one thing all of us can do. Not everyone has
Hmm.
the gift that you or I have to do this as our profession and do this, to help people
To
in
see
these ways.
dead people.
Yeah, but signs, like, for example, license plates and reoccurring numbers are signs
Hmm.
for me and for a good friend of mine. And I pull up next to this car. This was a few days ago. I was having just a bit of a crud morning, and I was like, "Look,
Hmm.
I need you guys to cheer me up. Can you do that?" So I pull up, and the car right next to me at the stoplight, up one and next to me, said the license plate said signs. And I was like,
Oh.
oh, cool. Is that for me? And I get all the chills in my body. And I go pick up my daughter and come back around to the next stoplight. And it said, yep, 222. And 222 is like
Wow.
my number. So the
Yeah.
first license plate I see is that. Then the second license plate I see is like, yes, it's a sign for you. And 222, which is their way of saying we're with you. My birthday is 22. Like, just twos show up for me all the time. And I'm in a universal year too, so especially now I see twos a lot.
Yeah.
But some people might think, oh, that's crazy. How could that be? But how do you get a license plate that says signs and then one that says yep 222? Like, are you kidding me? Like, how is that possible? That you can't make that up, you know?
Well, this is it. And so, one of the things that I have always said to clients and people who have come through intuition training with me, if you want to ask for a sign and you want to really push the limits, ask for something really weird. I remember someone on a program that I was on, and she was just like, oh yeah, I did, like I see all these signs, but I'm like, I see feathers, I see rainbows, I see this, I see that, and they're all so stereotypical. I was like, well, ask for something weird. She
Yeah.
was like, okay. She messaged me the next day and she said, I had a question that I wanted to ask, and I said, if it's a yes, show me a purple car. And she was
A
like, you would not
purple
believe.
car.
Purple car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because she was like, you never see a purple car. Like, it's just, I've never seen a purple car. And she, like, literally then went out on a walk and then bam, purple car just goes past. And she was just like, whoa. And I'm like, yes, you can call it anything, any sign. And my favorite story is one where, so I was reading a book all about signs. So it encouraged me to like talk more. And, I'd already been using signs. I'd had a lot of signs since my early 20s. I have symbols for specific angels. I have like a whole dictionary of different signs and
Yes.
symbols. But I lost two jobs back to back very quickly. It was the universe being like, it's time. At the
Time
time, you
to
don't think
elevate.
about that. Yeah, it's like you can work for yourself now. I'd wanted to, I was leaning and going that way, and then the whole universe was like, and done, you're doing this now. And when I did lose a job, because I'd been in employment for so long, so many years, so, always had that structure and that stability, I said to the universe, I was like, look, I understand what you're asking me to do. I understand you want me to work through spirit, like talking, communicating, all of the stuff. I get it. However, like, do I need to get another job and continue to build, or do I just stay and build? Like, I didn't have savings. I didn't have this
Right.
was just after COVID. It was like the whole world was upside down. I didn't even know if I'd be able to get another job because I'd specifically been fired. So then it's like, well, how do you get a reference if you've been fired from this job? And like all of this kind of stuff. So I said to the universe, okay, if you want me to do this, you want me to work for myself and not get another job, you need to show me a fully dressed Christmas tree. Now, keep in mind, this was in February. So I'm asking a lot. And later that day, I'm reading the book about signs, and then it talked about how a woman was putting stuff onto a Christmas tree. And I was like, close. But I
Yeah.
said, I want to see.
More. Give me more.
I want more.
Give me proof.
Especially when it's something where you're like,
So
okay,
big.
this is a big decision. Like, I
Yeah.
need to know. Like, I have to know. Like, I know that spirit are there. I know that they're supporting me. I know that's blah, 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 blah. But we still have that niggle in the back of our mind. Later that evening, I'm watching a YouTube video, and it's just like very standard. Like, some of the stuff I watch on YouTube is very like 13-year-old boy like viewership. It's a bunch of gamers doing whatever they're doing. It's just stuff that tunes my brain out. And all of a sudden I realized that it's from December, and that in the background of one of the guys' like videos in the corner is a fully dressed Christmas tree. And I was like, I want to see it in person though.
So now you had it twice in roughly the same, a short amount of time.
Within 12 hours of me
Yeah,
making
same
the
day. Yeah.
declaration.
Yeah.
So then the next morning, now bearing in mind, I've now got no job. I don't have to get up early, but I woke up at the crack of dawn, 5 a.m., and it's pitch black outside. And I'm like, right, I'm going to go drive out of London to a nice, like, countryside walk with the dog. So pack her in the back of the car and off we go. Now, I've been to this place before, so I know the way. I don't have my sat nav going. So I'm like, we go this way.
I don't have my what? What do you call it?
Sat nav.
Sat nav? Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm like, what would it be called? What do you call it?
Your
Just
navigation. Yeah.
I guess because it's like
I'm such an American.
like,
I'm like, what do you call that?
I know. Sometimes I try and rephrase my words when I'm speaking to Americans, but
roll with it. Just go. So you did not have your sat nav up because you knew where you were going.
I knew where I was going, but I missed my turning, and I was like, oh, that's weird. I don't normally miss that turning, but I'm like, it's 5 a.m. Of course I missed my turning. So I then take the next road, and I don't usually take that road. And no word of a lie, I get down the road and I'm looking, and I look in someone's window, and I was like, I can see flashing lights in someone's window. And I carry on down the road. I pull up outside this house. There's no one on the street. It's silent, pitch black everywhere. And in this window is a little 2-foot Christmas tree, flashing lights. And I was like, well, one, I said, holy fuck. Because it's like, I was like, it's February.
Yes.
Like, it's February.
You're supposed to have a Cupid or a Valentine or something February-ish.
So I'm like, okay, we're really doing this. Like, we are really doing this. And I haven't gone back into employment since then. So, yeah.
You were like, okay, I saw it. You saw, what was the first thing that you saw? You saw it.
So
you read it. That's right. You read it in a book.
Yeah.
Then you saw it on a video and you said, not good enough. And then they took you by a house with the flashing Christmas tree in February. And you're like, okay, fine. I got it.
Yeah. So the logic behind it in the February, I believe, is because it was 2021. So we'd obviously had like the weird COVID year. And in the UK, it was, they kept doing all these weird shutdowns, but like for Christmas, they'd said there wouldn't be any lockdown. You could celebrate, you could go and visit everybody. And then like like 2 days before Christmas. They were like, no, lockdown, you can't go anywhere. So people actually did leave decorations up longer and things like that. But I'd never seen anyone in their windows, because it was more just like seeing stuff if it was inside someone's house or something, because they were just like,
Yes.
oh, I just didn't want to take it down because it was jolly. Like you could kind of get away with it. But yeah, I'd not seen, and
I'm making some assumptions here, but who's to say if you went at 9 or 10 or 11 in the morning that the lights would have been on, you
I wouldn't
know?
have seen it. Like even
Right.
with the flashing light then, you wouldn't have acknowledged
Noticed
it.
it.
And
Yeah.
it's like, I'd never been down that road. I've never been down that road since. Like it was just because the other road is quicker. It doesn't have speed. Like it's just quicker. But I just missed
Yes.
it. I was just in my zone, away with the fairies. I mean, I
Yep.
have so many stories about signs. Like I could literally create a podcast just on signs alone,
I
because
love it. I love it.
they're my favorite.
It almost, for me, when I go the wrong way, I almost always see a license plate or a something that I meant to see. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is why I took the wrong turn.
Yeah.
Like
I've
it
done it
happens to
with,
me a lot.
so I have a big, so birds are my main thing. I can kind of, birds have always been my thing. My first ever symbol was magpies, which was for my granddad, who has been my angel and guide throughout my entire life. He died when my dad was 3, 4, something like that. So I never knew him, but he's just the one. Even as I say that, he's like, ha 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 ha, in the background. So
I know. I was like, I got some pressure on my chest because, we have this in common. We both have our grandfathers as our guides, and I can feel his
like,
presence.
yeah,
Like, oh, are you
like,
going to talk
hello.
about us?
Like, that does. It's like, okay, calm down, guys. Um, so I've always had birds as a thing. So magpies was for him, but I had a lot of magical experiences. Again, Christmas is a thing for me. Not this Christmas, the Christmas before, where I was seeing hawks everywhere, and it's not something that's very frequent where I am. It's quite rare. But one would like fly down in front of the car, or one would just be like, they'd just be very visible. And the amount of times I would take the wrong turn and then I would see a hawk, and I'm like, okay, thank you guys.
Yes.
So yeah, if you take the wrong turn, look for something, because there's a reason you've gone that way.
Yeah, that's a good advice. Like if for some reason you do something out of your normal pattern,
Mhm.
um, and I always say signs too. If you overthink it, it probably isn't a sign. Like, is it this? Is it this? Maybe it's this. Oh, maybe it's this thing over here. And you're like constantly hovering and looking for it. For
Mhm.
me, I find that signs just kind of appear where
Mhm.
it's like, and then I always say, not that they can't manipulate things, because they can, but typically what they're doing is drawing your attention to something so that you can see it and see the
Yeah.
sign.
Yeah.
And so it's like when it happens out of the blue, where you see something and you think of your grandmother, or you think of somebody you love, or whatever it might be, then that's a good indicator that it's truly a sign and that your team and
Yeah.
spirit's trying to give you a sign. Do you agree with
I
that, or what do you think about that?
100%. Yeah, they are always there trying to give you signs. And it's also thinking about, like you say, so if you're thinking about your grandmother and you see the sign, or you see the sign and then you think of your grandmother, like, what are you thinking and feeling in that moment? Because they
Yes.
will very much manipulate signs. Because like you said, you having a shitty day, and then you get a sign and it's like, oh, I feel a lot better now. I had similar. Even this morning, I was sending a voice note to a friend of mine saying I was like frustrated with certain situations and I wasn't feeling low, but I just wasn't feeling myself. And I sent that voice note and was just like, ugh, 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 that kind of energy. That's the only way to explain it. I just felt ugh. And all of a sudden, I can hear a bird chirping. Now I'm at the beach, so there's no reason for certain birds to be around. And I'm like looking around me, like, where is this bird? And I look up, and it's a skylark, and it's above my head, floating, singing. And I was just
Oh,
like, okay, thank you. Because it's them getting my attention of like, remember to be in the moment. Remember
yeah.
everything's fine. Remember
Yes.
you have everything you need. Like, be aware. Like, and it completely took me out of my like ugh, energy, because I was just like, oh yeah, thank you. I remember, like, I'm here for a reason. This is how I'm happy.
Yes,
Everything's good. Like, my life is brilliant. Like, but we just get human sometimes. But they then
for
go,
sure.
haha, remember that spirit here, that everything's fine.
I had that, like I was again, like not reoccurring numbers is common for me, but I was dropping my daughter off at school and I just felt cruddy. I was getting a little bit into fear and I was just
Mhm.
allowing myself to creep into some things that I normally don't let myself live in, that kind of low vibrational energy.
Mhm.
And I turned the corner and I saw on the house, it was like 9111, ones together. And then I look immediately to the right and it's a mailbox number that was like some like 9222. And then
Mhm.
the very next, there's a truck parked there that's never parked there because I drive this street every freaking day to drop my kid off. And the guy's license plate was something, and then it was 2222. So it was like
Yeah.
all within 10 seconds of each other. And those things never occurred to me ever. And I drive that road every single day. And it was just, and then I felt this like warm tingliness around my body, like, you're okay. You're not alone. Get out of your fear. We're here to help you. It was like a warm hug from my team in spirit,
Yeah.
seeing those numbers. And then, like you said, having a feeling or emotion afterwards. Like, did it shift your energy?
Mhm.
And that's also another good way to know if it's a sign. Did it get you out of a cloudy vibe?
Yeah, this is it. And it's like people sometimes think they're just like, oh, I'm just imagining things. I'm just imagine. It's like, well, what if you're not? Like, live into the what if, but the what
Yeah.
if, the nice stuff. Because it's like, okay, well, what if when you think that you're seeing, feeling, sensing, you see something out of the corner of your eye and you're like, Granddad? Like, what if that is Granddad? Like, what if that is
Yeah.
real? What if that is a message for you? What if that is a sign for you? Like, because the energy shift that that can bring can completely change your day. Like how I was feeling this morning, I might not have wanted to record this podcast because I would have come home and just been like, I just want to zone out. But because I was like uplifted, then it's kind of like a transition on for the rest of my day and it
And your
completely
your
shifts the
team in
mood.
spirit is not going to let you not hang out with me.
100%. They're like, we are doing the doings.
We're doing the doings. Kara, Julie, together doing the doings. Love it. That's so true. Um, have you ever had, just getting into some of the juicy gossip, have you ever had like a famous person try to like get a message through to you or something like that where you're like, or did a reading and a famous person came through, or they died and they're trying to like get to their loved ones and somehow they've opened a wormhole portal into you? Like, have you ever had that happen? I know it's
So
kind of a
I
random question, but I'm
It is.
curious.
I think because my circle, I'm also not someone that's like, I'm not very good with like famous people as a human. Like, I'm not very good with faces and things like that. So I think I'm probably the worst person for them to like try and come through to. However, when I have watched things, so if there have been certain people who have passed away and they're famous and so there's a I also feel like I'm not going to use that example because it's so recent. There is somebody in the UK who is not famous, but they're well known and they've passed
Hmm.
away and they haven't said how they've died. And I'm like,
Yes.
I know.
I had the same. I had the same thing happen. This was a few years ago. I don't want to give too many details because
Mhm,
I don't want anybody to know who it is.
mhm,
But this famous person died and they showed me, and it was very much their own doing what happened.
mhm,
And they showed me how they died. And the whole world for months and months um, thought this boy said the genders, thought this person died a certain way. And I knew how they died. And they kept coming to me over and over and over and over again because they wanted me to reach out to their family to tell them what happened and to apologize. They wanted to, like, they
mhm.
kept showing me, I want to stand in my shoes, I want to take ownership, and I want to apologize for what happened. And I was like, I hate to break it to you, Kat, but I don't know your family. And if you really want them to have me deliver the message, bring them to me. Find a way to
Mhm.
bring them to me if that's really what you want, which never happened. But my team in spirit keeps saying I will meet them and tell them the story someday. So
Okay,
I'm like,
yeah,
okay, maybe I will someday. Who knows?
yeah,
But it's been several years since this happened. But I'll say it was a he showed me how he died. And then
yeah,
the autopsy reports came out all across the world of the news of how they died. And sure enough, it was the exact things he showed me. So similar to you. So did
yeah.
that kind of happen where you
Yeah.
saw how they died and nobody knew?
I've done that a few times where it's just
Yeah.
a news report. And it's one of the reasons I don't necessarily watch the news as much, because if you think I get that from that, it's like if you watch something about a tragedy, like it's all this information like popping in. But yeah, I've had it before where it's just like general conversation with friends, like, oh, so what do you think happened? It's like they haven't released the information, da, 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 da. And I'm like, oh, it's probably X, Y, and Z. And then that comes, and they're like, how did you? It's like, I just know things.
I just sometimes know some things.
I can pick stuff up off of so I watch a lot of true crime stuff.
Ooh. I was
Technically
just talking about this with my husband about peeps that can solve crimes or give tips and things like that.
yeah, so I've never tried it, although I've had people, so again, when I did the animal communication, I used to get people reach out to me because they couldn't find their pets, and I would be like, oh, they're here, like, and just tell them
Are
stuff.
you for real?
Yeah.
You can help people find their pets.
Yes, yeah, I don't do it as much anymore, but I can, because I can also speak to deceased pets. I get a lot of deceased pets come through in readings, and again, I think I attract people because I mean I remember being in this woman's house once doing a reading and talking to her, and then all of a sudden I just looked down and then looked up, and she was like, "What?" I was like, "The dog." Like, and she was like, "Oh, he's always comes through in reading." And I was like,
Oh,
"He's
that's
cute."
good.
Like, and he
Yeah.
just like walked through the room, and I'm just like, "Oh, hello," like, and stuff like that. But yeah. So the lost pets thing is a strange one. Like, you get people. It would always be cats, like more than anything, cats, because they wander, and especially in London. So London, when I was living in London, um, I always used to laugh. I don't know if they have this in America. Do you have like Nextdoor, like the app called Nextdoor?
I mean, maybe, but I'm not aware of it, Julie.
So I think it is very UK based because it's linked to the police, but it's like a community group. So think Facebook, and it's very like Facebook, in that you can go on and post things, and it just goes to the people who are signed up who are in your community. So
It's
if
like
you
you're
have
like a
lost,
neighborhood app.
yeah,
Yeah, I think maybe
essentially.
we do have it. Yeah.
But it would be people who, so you see that on there all the time of like, has anyone seen my cat? And then someone will be like, oh my God, I thought he was my next door neighbor's cat. Like, the cats have like multiple houses, especially when you live in a big city. They're just like, people will send a picture and be like a cat that's laying on their bed of like, I've kind of adopted this cat. Whose is he? Like, that kind of thing. But yeah, you would get people that would reach out and be like, oh, I've lost my cat. Like, there was one that I was like, oh, he's stuck in someone's shed. Like, you need
Oh.
to like go and find him. And they were like, oh, he's in the neighbor's shed. For like a week he was just in there, like, it was like he got stuck.
Little kitty cat. Our neighbor's cat got stuck in our garage once, like because he is the neighborhood cat. He roams all the places. This doesn't have anything to do with mediumship. However, I opened the garage and he goes, "Meow," runs out. And I was like, "Whoops, I'm sorry, Leo. You were in our garage all night, buddy. Like, you got to get out of there before nighttime." And I shut that thing.
Like, I'm trying to communicate all the time. But yeah,
Yeah.
talking about the true crime thing. So I've never done it for an actual crime, and I don't know that I would want to. I think it's too much
Yeah.
pressure.
Yeah.
But when I do watch true crime, and it's kind of a topic, and even I have sort of thought maybe I need to stop watching because it is kind of a lower vibration thing to watch. But I mean, I'm not the only one that has like a mild obsession with all of this stuff that goes on.
Totally.
But I will often, when I'm watching these shows, be shown where the person, so if they're going like, and we know that so and so did it, and like they were the last person to have them, but we don't know where the body is, and we're looking for the body, and I'm shown where the body is. Like, I can see, I had one the other day, and it was just like, oh, I feel like it's probably his garden, but I'm like, I can see very specific grass with a very specific tree, and then at the end they showed it, and I was like, ha, there it is.
Yeah, I know. I was watching one on Netflix and that happened. And the whole time, the whole first two episodes are, and I didn't know the story, but the first two episodes are leading you to believe that this guy killed his girlfriend. And I was like, he didn't do it. He didn't do it. He didn't do it.
I know what show that is, I think.
And then all of a sudden they're like, he didn't do it. I'm like, I know.
It's like the weird kidnapped one where the guy was doing it in the neighborhood as well. Like, yeah.
Same.
Yeah, that was really weird because I was just like, oh, this is all really weird. I was like, I don't feel like they faked it, but I was like, but this was the weirdest
story
his
ever.
His energy was really odd. So I can understand why the police thought it.
Yes.
Because he was just, I think because he just, I can't, unless you've seen it, like, if people now go and watch it, they'll see what we mean. But it was like, you sort of, the medium in you is like, he didn't do it, but then the human is like, he definitely did.
Yeah, what
like,
a jerk. Yeah. You're like arguing with yourself, your higher self and your lower self. You're like fighting with yourself. That's funny. I don't have a desire to do that either. I
No.
will. I did do a reading for someone who had their grandfather passed away in like the early 1900s, and they believe it was from foul play, but it was never discovered. And he showed me exactly how he died, how somebody opened a floorboard and took the money out. He had money in his home. So they
Mhm.
showed me, and it gave the family some validation because it was 100 years ago. And it gave them some validation of, we always knew that. We always knew that there was foul play. And so it gave
Yeah.
them some peace of mind, but it wasn't like a cold case where they're going to crack open a cold case of a bunch of dead people like too long ago.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of pressure. I find it fascinating watching people doing it. But it's, yeah, I mean, I found it a lot of pressure just to look for someone's cat. So I'm like, a whole human? Like, I don't think so.
You're like,
Like,
can't do it. And I don't really have a desire to do that, but good on the people who use their gifts in that way.
yeah,
But that's not
yeah.
for me personally. Okay. How about, have you ever had an opportunity where you've used your gifts to give you an advantage in the human world, or used it to know things about people where you're like,
Mm.
I actually know that about you. I'm not going to say anything. Like, have you
So
ever had
this
things
comes down
happen like
to,
that?
I've had a conversation with somebody recently about this, about like the ethics of this, because one of my gifts is I am so good at tapping into people's energy. Like, you can tell me a person and I can tell you everything about their personality. And I'm like, this is this right or wrong?
Right.
Like, because
Yes.
it doesn't have to. So, as an example, like I could have a reading, and I mean, you get so many people that do like romance readings, and someone will come on and be like, oh, like, I'm in a new relationship. I'm just not sure that person's invested. And I can then see like that person's energy, but I can also see their ex's energy. And I'm like, how far do I go in
Yes.
digging into, because they didn't come for a reading, but I could sit
Right.
there and be like, this person's this, and this. But I think I do use it for my advantage sometimes, especially with like clients that I'm going to work with, because sometimes it's like on paper, everything ticks all of the boxes. Um, so one of the things that I do is I work inside people's businesses as well. So it's not the psychic stuff, but it's sort of like agency work that I have done where I'm contracted and I'm sorting out the back end of their business to actually make it make sense in there, because most of them don't. But I had a a call with a lady who was like, she was next level, like super intelligent, super like just doing all the things, author, like really well represented, all of this kind of stuff. And you're like, this is a brilliant opportunity. But as I'm sitting on the call, I'm like, no,
Something tells you no.
no, 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 just all the no's. And I was so glad I listened, because I
Yeah.
know that since that call, that lady has gone through like 4 or 5 people in their business. Like, no one
Mm,
sticks, because
hmm.
it just doesn't work. I was like, oh, and I was trying to explain it to the person that had like connected us. And I was like, look, when I look at this lady, I'm being shown another lady. Like, and that's how they were doing. They were like, this woman. And she was so strict in how she wanted everything done. There was no room for negotiation on
Hmm.
like, this will make your business better. No, because we do it like this. It's like, well, this will make your business better. No, but we do it like this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I'm being shown that woman where I'd had that experience. And it was like, it's that again. And I couldn't really explain it, because it was like, but she's really nice and she's really, she's looking for help. She's reaching. And it's like, no, like, it's a no for me. So sometimes it just doesn't make sense. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that would have made me a lot of money, but it would have killed, me.
Yeah.
Like,
I
to be
I have
honest.
that too, where I just intuitively know something isn't for me,
Yeah.
or friendships or things like that, where I
Hmm.
just know. I would say before I had my full on spiritual awakening and I just was highly intuitive and just knew things. This is, of course, I wouldn't do this today. Like, the ethics of it, I would not do today.
Yeah. Now
Um,
we know more.
Right. However, I was in like college, early years, outside of college, like young 20s. And I was everybody's like favorite bar trick. So I would just intuitively know shit about people. And so my
Hmm.
friends, we would find the hottest guy in the bar or the club or wherever we were. And they'd be like, what does he do for a living? Like, or what is his major in college? And I would just be like, oh, he's a construction worker. And then whatever I knew that they did, and I would just know, like, and I
Hmm.
would say I was like 95% accurate. Sometimes I would get it wrong, but
Wow.
I didn't understand it at the time, but of course it was my intuition. But then I would elevate it, like, oh, are you a construction foreman? So I would always like one up it to give them like a pat of their ego. So they would be like, Kara, go up to that guy, say something. And so my party trick was I would go say something that I knew about them. And
Hmm.
then I'd be like, hey, we just have a little bet and I need you to like settle a bet, settle a wager. Are you a construction foreman for a construction company? And he'd be like, holy shit. Like, no, but I'm a construction worker. Like, how did you know that about me? And I was like, that's it. I just thank you for settling the bet. And I'd turn around and I'd give myself like a little, I was right. And then my friends would be like, oh, you were right. And then I would walk away. And then sure enough, they would be like, get back here. How did you know that? And I'd be like, there you go, Jessica. There's your guy. Have fun. And so I would be like the hookup girl for my
Yeah.
friends.
I've used it for my own relationships in the past.
Oh, yeah.
My ex, he used to lie a lot. And it was a really weird situation because I'm like, you're not lying because you're cheating. You're lying because you just don't want to say something. So it would be like
Mm,
we'd arranged to meet up for an evening, but then he realized that the football was on or his mates wanted to go out. He would lie instead of just being like, yo, I'm just gonna go hang out with the mates, like, let's meet up later. Like he just didn't have the balls to be like, I want to do this instead of what we've planned. And he said, it's such a strange thing. There was one evening where I was like, I know you're lying. Like, I know that you're lying. And I was on the phone to him and he's telling me he's at work, but I can hear the background is all different. And I'm like, and Spirit are telling me, bullshit,
yes.
like 100%. And he's just like, oh no, you're just overthinking it. And no, you're lying. You are lying. And I ended up just giving up on the relationship because I was like, I know that
Yeah.
you're lying. Just stop. Like, just stop it. And I think that's one of the things that I get a lot. I've even had it with clients who, again, tell these kind of weird little lies and I think it's in some people's personalities that they tell themselves it's not a lie, but it's not 100% the truth. So it's
Right.
a version of
Right.
a event. And it's like, I had a client do it recently, and then it's like, but I know you're lying. Like, Spirit are telling me to look and check. So I look and check, and I'm like, now I've got two versions of a story. This doesn't make sense. But
Yeah.
again, it's one of those spaces of like, how do you go to that client and be like, oh yeah, by the way, Spirit told me that this isn't true and that actually you were doing stuff on the back end and it's quite difficult to
I know. So then you got to figure out why. And then you have to be like, is it possible that maybe you're a little scared to grow your business in this way? So you're maybe like
yeah.
preventing these things, or like,
Yeah,
you try to like get about it in
it's
another
like
way. Yeah.
navigating it. But yeah, I think for me, because of again, like I mentioned before, I'm very good at like, I like to look at blocks. So when I can tap into people's energy, I'm very good at finding not what's wrong with them as such. That's
Yeah.
the only way that's being worded in my head. But it is essentially like, I can see their blocks, I can see what
Right.
they're dealing with. So it makes it quite like, oh, should I be like tapping into that? Because it's quite easy for me to then just share it, especially when you're in flow with Spirit, right? Like, stuff just comes out of your mouth and you're like, I need to stop this.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm with you. There's a little bit of like, I'm actually very good at boundaries. And
mhm,
when the button is off, it's off. And so they like people try to come through if I have a reading in a few days and they're coming early and I like the button is off. It's off until Friday morning. So come back then. And I
yeah,
just tune it out. And so for me, it's been a blessing because I've just started. I was coached and advised by other intuitives to be really good about your boundaries and not and allow yourself to still have a human experience because I
yeah,
think that that's tricky, right? Because we
yeah.
can tune in all the time if we want to.
Mhm.
I just personally don't want to. I don't want to go to the grocery store and be like, oh, she's, something bad's happened over
Yeah.
there. Like, I want to be able to go to the grocery store and get my cucumbers. like
Yeah, no,
so
100%.
so
There
for
are
me
some
it's boundaries.
environments, there are some environments where you kind of can't help it. So as an example, like obviously we met at BBD Live, which was
Yeah,
a
which
huge
is
event. So like you're
called
talking
Business
nearly,
by Design for those of you that
yeah,
aren't in that. It's a business entrepreneurs community.
Right.
And Julie was
And
going to be my friend, whether she wanted to or not. We were going to be BFFs. We met
I
in
was
line.
forced into it.
Yes,
And now I'm stuck and I can't get
that's
out.
right. With all the hugs and love, you got to come my way.
But even that, like so I'm there and I'm doing all the typical techniques, the grounding, the energy work that I don't need to connect. And technically, I'm not connecting. I'm not sitting there and talking to spirit while I'm in line. But there is, like, in the example I think I shared with you at the time, but so we got in early because we were VIP, right? We paid to specifically, it was just ease, I think, for both of us of like,
Correct.
let's just be at the front. It's easier. But we're inside, we get access 20 minutes or whatever it is before everybody else. And then the rest of the doors open. So the rest of the 900 people all come into the room. And I think in situations like that, there is nothing you can do about the energy. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot switch off from that energy, because the version I gave, because everyone's like, oh, what does it feel like? Like everybody's energy, everyone's hype. It's like, it's not just their energy. They're all coming in with 2 or 3 spirit guides. So there's thousands of souls walking into the room, all excited and pumped and raring to go for the day. And it's like, it just hits you. And it's like, whoa, okay. And I think that's why I've always really so I used to love going to music festivals, and all my friends would be like, let's get to the front, and I'm like, no, you'll catch me on the side. And that's the reason. It's like, now I realize it's because everybody's energy has energy with them. So
Yes.
it's like multi-dimensional. Like one person's energy is never one person's energy, it's at
Right.
least two. So yeah,
Yes. It is
it's
true.
an interesting one.
I'm a very social, very extroverted person.
Hmm.
And now, like, big crowds are harder for me as I
Hmm.
continue to awaken my gifts.
Yeah.
But in particular, big cities, very concreted building, loud noise, lots of people cities
Yeah.
are very overwhelming for me. And I used to
Hmm.
love, a small
Yeah.
town farm kid. I'd be like, get me to the city. And now I'm like, yeah, that's too much for me. It's
Oh
not a
yeah.
vacation. Like I need to be where there's a tree, there's some nature, there's something that
Yeah.
grounds me. A bit like being in a big city for a long time is a very energy suck for me, which
Well,
wasn't always the case.
this was part of the reason that I moved out of London, because I was always cool to live in London. I was born in a smaller city, but I think because my granddad's energy is very South London, I was brought up not like the people here in this city. The people here are very much brought up like, you get married young, you have kids young, that's what you do. You sort of leave school, get a job, and that's your life.
Yeah.
Whereas I was always like, I want to do all this stuff. I want to do all the
Hmm.
things. I don't know what I want to do, but I want to do it. So I moved out and moved to London very early. I moved before, so my friends hadn't even finished like university to like move with me. I moved on my own. I was just like, okay, bye. And it it was always my soul home. Like I always loved London,
Mm.
even as a kid. Like there's a road that drives in from where I am, and then you suddenly see the skyscrapers, and it would always just like light me. Like I would just get goosebumps and butterflies. But the energy, especially as my energy evolved, and then working with spirit more and more, and it just wasn't the same. It wasn't the same after COVID,
Right.
100%. Like everybody's
Yeah.
energy really changed, and it changed how I viewed the city. But again, because I'd lost my job, I had the opportunity to work from anywhere. And
Yeah.
I went off and did 6, 7 weeks in the south of France in 2021. And again, because of COVID, there was no one traveling. Like me in the south of France, I was like the only English person there other than my brother. So it was like, and they loved it. They were just like, there's no one here. Because in that area, you get like a lot of Americans, a lot of Germans,
Sure.
a lot of English people, but
It's
there was
fancy
no one
pants.
there. It is. I was so lucky because of COVID. So I got that six week stay. Probably cost me what would cost you a week now, like because
Mm.
they just like bummed all their prices down because no one was traveling. And I, again, trusted spirit. Everyone said to me, "Why have you booked that? Like the borders aren't open. You can't go." And I was like, I'm going. I
Watch
don't know
me.
about you. Like I've been told I'm going to the south of France, so I'm gonna go. Everyone thought I was crazy because it's like, you've paid this money, you've done this, that, and the other. And I'm like, I'm going. But it completely changed my life because I sat there and I worked, but I watched the dog sit in the garden, just looking at the vineyards, having her best life, like outside all day long, every day. And I was like, she can't do this in London. Like she can sit on the balcony, but it's not the same. And I
Right.
was like, and I'm at peace. Like I was driving slower. I was taking more time to
Mm.
do things. I was in the energy of sound, like the south of France is like it's so slow, like so slow. If you need maintenance, it's so slow. And my brother jokes all the time because at the time he was working in a maintenance role, and he was like, oh, on a Friday, like we start at like 10, and then at like 11 we have a beer, and then at 12 we're done. And I'm like, so Fridays you don't work? He's like, no, Fridays we work. I start at like 10, I
Yeah.
have a beer at 11, and then we're done at 12. I'm like, okay, but that's just the lifestyle. Like it's
Yeah.
completely different. And not saying they don't work hard, they just don't work on Fridays, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, it's their version. And he's like, if you want things done, it's just going to be done slowly. Like you go to the store and it's like slow, and they all talk to each other, and I'm like, they don't do this in London.
Yeah.
Like you go in, you buy your stuff, you leave.
Yeah.
Like
Zip,
there
zip.
they're like, hey, how's your day going, what is going on? It's like it's all social. And not
Do
that
you
I'm
do you think, Julie, there's some through line message for others in that story? Like,
Mhm.
energy can change. You can
Yeah,
have a situation that's very for you, and then all of a sudden it just isn't for you anymore. Like,
yeah.
what do you think would be the parallel message for other people in that story of like, this space was so for me, and then getting out of it and being somewhere else showed me that it maybe wasn't for me in the same way as it once was?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at things of like when you look at your parents and things like that, and when we're younger, we kind of like laugh about how they just want it to be a quieter pace of life, and they just don't want to. But it's part of our aging process. Like our soul just settles down. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the only way I can explain it. And the thing that I would love people to know is that actually you can have soulmate connections with multiple things and multiple people. So even with relationships, and you're like, oh, but they're my soulmate. Like they were your soulmate. Like just because it ended doesn't mean that they weren't your soulmate. It
Right.
means that they were designed for you in that specific set time to learn something, grow, etc., etc. And it was the same for me. Like London was a soul city for me. I believe I've lived there multiple lives before. I knew that I would always live there, even as a child. I lived there, I did it, but then it wasn't for me anymore. And it was the most difficult decision to be like, okay, I'm leaving. But I just told myself, I was like, well, if I leave and I don't like it, I can come
You
back.
can always come
Like,
back. Yeah,
like the city's not going anywhere.
that's
and,
right.
and it's very similar, like the same with jobs. Like people are like, yeah, but I've always worked in this industry. Like I knew I was going to work in this industry. I trained for this. Yes, it was a soul connection. You were supposed to do that, but it doesn't have to last forever. It's
Right.
like you're allowed to evolve, you're allowed to
Yes.
change, you're allowed to try different things. The whole point of a human experience is that we are supposed to learn and evolve and grow. We're all here to like help one another in some way, shape, or form, even in the smallest. Like, some people are like, oh, I'm not, I don't have a purpose, I'm just meant to be a mum. Well, that's your purpose. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're healing, you're growing, you're like all of that is part of it. But even then, you get people who are like, oh, I always knew that I would be a mum, but I want more, and then I feel guilty. You're allowed to have both. You're allowed to have multiple things. You're allowed to have one thing if you want one thing. You're allowed to have two things if you want to have two things. Like all of it's fine. It's just evolution of energy. Like energy continuously moves. It doesn't want
Right.
to stay still. Like energy feels awkward when it stays still. That's why we get like in a funk, and that's why our energy, like we get like really
Stuck.
just low,
Mm-hmm.
because the energy's still. It's like make a decision, take a movement, even if it's
Yeah.
the smallest movement, because energy will move when you move. So yeah.
That's such beautiful advice. And I think it's like a perfect way for us to wrap because I mean, I think that's just the most beautiful advice. Be in the energy, be in flow with your energy. And if it
Mhm.
shifts or moves, move with it. And something may be for you one day and not the next, and pay attention to it. Pay
Yeah.
attention to the energy. So I would love as we wrap, like, you're an incredible business intuitive. I would love for people to find their way to you and use you as a coach for them in their own business endeavors. How can people find you? How can people connect with you? What are the breadcrumbs to get to Julie Chandler?
So the most active place, I guess, would be Instagram. So you're looking at Julie Chandler __, because someone else is a Julie Chandler, so we
How
have to put
dare
the
they?
underscore. So I know, I'm like, without putting in the Julie Chandler, I was like, I don't think I can do that. Um, I'm like, I don't have a blue tick. But yeah, that's where I'm the most active, and it's me in the inbox. Other than that, it's my website, which
I
is
love that.
juliechandler.co.uk is the website.
Okay, it broke up just a little bit. So it's
Okay.
juliechandler.co.uk.
That's right. Yes.
Perfect. I love that. And just high level, what are the things that people can do? They can get a reading with you. They can do
Mhm.
business coaching. You have a year-long membership program people can do. Give me the high sweeping ways people can work with you.
Yeah, so essentially you can have a general reading or a business reading. There's two different options in terms of the readings, which then essentially I kind of like people to come for a reading before they even try and do coaching aspects, because it means that we can kind of tap into your energy and make sure that we're going in the right direction. Because if it's not me, I will point you to who you need to be working with.
Love that.
Um, and then the program is, yeah, so it's 6 or 12 months is what we're doing now inside Intuitively Led. So it's kind of content that allows you to become intuitively led, understanding that actually there's multi dimensions to business energy. So it's your business has its own energy as well as your energy, other people's energy, and all of the stuff in the universe as well. So that kind of guides
Love
you
it.
through that information, but also gives you access to me. It is very much a group coaching program. So yeah, love
Well,
it.
you are fantastic. You are one of my favorite people. I feel so
Yeah,
lucky that the universe brought us together.
me too.
So thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening to the Mediums podcast and my interview with Julie Chandler. As always, rate, share, subscribe, and keep growing our community of awakened listeners. So thank you, everybody. Have an awesome day.